Are you planning to soundproof your home? Well, there are some really costly mistakes that people sometimes do when they're starting out in soundproofing. And that's exactly why I interviewed Lisa Schott, who's an expert in soundproofing acoustics. And we're going to walk you through the most common mistakes people do when they're starting out. And make sure you stick around to the end because there are some really valuable and surprising tips that we're going to mention. So, Lisa, could you present yourself and tell me a little bit who you are and what do you work with?
I'm Lisa Schott. I am the founder and principal acoustical consultant of Quietly Making Noise LLC, which is based in Florida. I have had my acoustical consulting business for since 2002, so that's 18 years. But I've been working in the field of acoustics and noise control for about 30 years. Um,
How did you start? That's because most of people didn't even know that this is a job.
yes, and I get that question a lot. I meet people and tell them what I do, and they say, "Oh, I didn't even know that job existed." So I went to school at Georgia Tech and majored in mechanical engineering. I happened to take a class there, elective class in acoustics, and oh, I love the subject. So the light bulb went on, and I said, wow, that could be my specialty. I've always been interested in sound. My mother's a musician, and my father is nearly deaf. So I had that connection to sound in two different ways as I was growing up, but I never realized I could do it as a career until I took that class at Georgia Tech. And there wasn't a major available for it, so I completed my degree in mechanical engineering and took as many electives as I could in
Mhm.
acoustics and vibration to develop that. And then I learned a lot on the job.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, so what would you say is like your normal client, whatever that means?
Gosh, I have worked for clients all across the full range from residential to commercial to industrial,
Uh-huh.
transportation noise sources. What I always tell people is that we acoustical consultants can work in a variety of areas because the types of projects and the materials we use are different, but the basic laws of physics are the same.
Hmm.
So as long as you have a good understanding of that, you can figure out how to apply that to different types of projects. Now, the first 10 years of my career, I spent working on power plant noise control for Westinghouse Electric Corporation. And I designed power plants all over the world, trying to make them quiet, not only for neighbors who were located nearby, but also for the workers who have to work in the power plant.
I, all right, well, that makes sense that that job exists. I just never even thought about that.
Right. And when I started my business, I thought I would continue in the industrial side just because that's where my background was. But I found a large demand in multifamily residential. Very soon after I started my business, I was contacted by architects and developers who were building apartment buildings and condominiums that might have amenities on the first floor or elsewhere. But one of my first projects was an architect who was putting a bowling alley on the first floor of a building and they wanted to have apartments right above it. You can imagine
Oh,
what kind of noise issues there would be from having a bowling alley right below your home.
sounds like a cool project. Maybe that's all right. What's the most fun project you've ever done, and why was it fun, would you say?
One of my most fun and rewarding projects. I've been working on a very large performing arts center here in the Orlando area since 2008.
Mhm.
And it's actually the first and probably the only performing arts center project that I'll work on because that job, I'm a one person consulting firm, and that type of job is much bigger than a one person firm would take on. But I was
Mm.
very fortunate to partner with a firm out of New York City whose specialty is performing arts centers, but they wanted a local consultant to be their eyes and ears that could go to the site more often and make sure the project is being built according to our design standards. So that project's been a lot of fun because I also very much enjoy attending musical performances. So I
Mhm.
worked on this project. I know every inch of that building, and now I get to go to concerts there. And it's really rewarding when you're sitting next to somebody and they said, "Oh wow, the acoustics is great in here, and this show
Nice.
sounds really nice." And then I can kind of say, "Thank you, I worked on it."
That's really cool. Could we talk about the biggest mistakes you see people do when they are soundproofing on their own? What should they think about?
Well, when somebody's trying to work on a soundproofing issue, oftentimes it's with their residents. And there's a common misconception that a lot of people think insulation is the answer to every noise issue.
Mm,
Um, it does help with some issues, but it depends on what the problem is and also how severe it is. So when you have a noise issue in your home, a lot of the calls I get are mysterious noises. People hear something, they don't know where it's coming from.
mm,
So it's always best and usually most cost effective to treat a noise source at the source if you can. So it's really important to first find out what is causing this noise that you're hearing. And sometimes that's very difficult to do. Um, I always recommend, well, obviously you can pull in a consultant if you can afford that and have them come and diagnose the issue. But what you might want to do before that is start turning off things in your home, like turn off the air conditioner and see if you can still hear the noise. Turn off your refrigerator. Oftentimes, refrigerators make a humming sound
mm.
that if it's pushed up against a wall, it might be vibrating the structure, and that might be transmitting to other parts of the home. So you might never suspect it's the refrigerator, but
Right.
that could be the issue. So for people to do some self-diagnosis first is really helpful. And then if you can't trace down the problem, that might be the time to call in an expert.
Hmm. Okay.
And I mentioned, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I'm just following up. That makes sense that because most people don't even think about how vibrations can be transferred to other structures. Like one tip that I heard that was great that you should put if it's a huge thing, you should usually use rubber under it, and or even if it's a more heavier thing that vibrates a lot, you should use springs and put it on. For instance, if you are in a machine room or something like that, or focus on just the pipes if that is the thing that is vibrating. Correct?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and sometimes noise travels in mysterious ways. So you're right that depending on the answer to a vibration problem depends not only on the machine and how heavy it is, but also what is it sitting on. If you have let's say you have an air conditioner, air handler on the second floor of your home,
Mhm.
and you have a lightweight wood frame floor ceiling assembly, which is very common in homes, at least here in the US. um, that's a lightweight structure, and so you may need to go to the springs, which are normally considered an upgrade from a rubber pad, because when you have vibration isolation, and I'll try to keep this in simple layman's terms,
Thank you.
whatever you're putting it on to try to isolate that vibration has to be more flexible than the structure it's sitting on.
Mm,
Well, if your floor system is very flexible and it's able to move, you've got to put it on something that's more flexible than that. So
makes
that'll absorb the vibration. If your air handler that you're having an issue with is sitting on the ground level and maybe it's on a concrete pad, the rubber pads might be sufficient in that case. So the problem I mentioned before, you want to stop the noise at the source if it's possible. If you can't stop the noise at the source because, for instance, it's an air conditioner that you rely on, then you have to treat the path that the noise is traveling. And that might involve these spring or vibration isolators. But as you mentioned pipes before, it might involve placing insulation around the pipes so that they're not shaking the walls of your
yeah.
house. And a lot of people, as you mentioned, a lot of people don't realize vibration can turn into noise that we hear. You might have a problem that's starting as vibration, but you might not feel it. Just the way noise travels can sometimes be a little elusive, and you have to trace down the source and also exactly all the paths that it might be traveling through the house. But I feel like I'm getting a bit technical.
Yeah, it's but thank you for keeping because a lot of people are going to see this, including myself. We want to know like the very basics. And one basic tip that I heard that is great, and I want to hear your thoughts if you have similar tips, is that even if you soundproof, let's say, an entire wall perfectly soundproof, but if you have a hole that is like this big, then 95% of all the sound is going to come through anyway. So seals is one of those small things you actually have to think about. So weather strips and trying to seal off things, that's very often a priority. How much do you agree with that? And do you have other similar tips that thing people need to have keep in mind?
Yes, I agree completely with that. That's a common problem. If you're trying to block noise from one room to another, let's say you have a bedroom and
Mm.
maybe it's adjacent to your TV room or your home theater room, and one of the people in the family wants to go to sleep at night, but somebody else wants to stay up and watch the movie.
Yeah.
Uh, Developing good sound reduction for that wall is extremely important. And a lot of people, again, as I mentioned before, think that insulation is the answer. In a case like that, where you have a noise source that's potentially loud, like bass from a stereo or the loud booming bass from a movie, an action movie, for example, what you need is mass and density,
Yeah.
meaning you need heavy materials like concrete, drywall, plywood, or there's some specialty noise control products, like there's a product called mass loaded vinyl. You need to put those things into the wall to make the wall very heavyweight to provide good noise reduction. But going back to your point, any leaks in that wall can significantly reduce the noise reduction. And that might include doors that are not well sealed, a window between the walls, and even electrical outlet boxes. I always tell people if light can get through, then noise can get through. So if you're
Mm.
trying to make a wall or a door that's really well sealed, turn off all the lights and see if you can see light anywhere around that perimeter. You're going to get noise leaks through there as well.
That's smart. Yeah, I heard the same thing for well, air obviously, and like water. Like if you can, I heard another tip that if you take any material, you want to check if it's soundproof. If you can breathe through it, then it's not soundproof. Do you
Hmm.
agree with that?
That I had not heard it put that way before, but yeah, that's a very good way to look at it because, as I mentioned, you need something that's dense. Denser
Yeah.
materials are better at blocking noise.
Yeah, because I've seen people who just put styrofoam foam or some kind of foil or something that is very porous or something that has a lot of air in it, and they just put it on their the thing they want to soundproof, and that basically makes no effect. Is that correct?
Very little, yes. I always try to describe to my clients with acoustics, there's always different degrees on how well you can do with noise reduction. And one thing I'd like to emphasize on this, buyer beware. There's a lot of published information out there from manufacturers of products or people who test products that's just not very good for use. It can be misleading. I'm not saying the information is wrong, but if you really don't know what you're looking at, it can be easy to be misled because I always tell people, I'll hold up a piece of paper like this. Everything's an acoustical material. This is an acoustical material. This piece of paper, it's just not a very good one. But every material either blocks sound, absorbs sound, or reflects sound.
Mm.
And some materials do a little bit of all three. It's just a matter, acoustics is a matter of degrees. How well does your chosen material do that? And a piece of open cell foam might give you a little bit of sound reduction, but the egg crate type materials that you see in recording studios, for example, are designed for the purpose of absorbing sound and preventing reflections. So they're obviously going to be a lot better.
Yeah, and I heard another one that kind of summarizes what you say is that the whatever you're going to read on a package regarding the soundproofing quality has been tested in a laboratory environment, right? So
Correct.
whatever you're going to read, it's not in your environment, and which a person should usually do if they're soundproofing a floor or they're soundproofing a kitchen or something. If you're living in an apartment, then make sure that if and you have some neighbors who have tried to soundproof, ask what they did. That's the one tip that I heard that was great. Do you have any other tip that could definitely help a beginner soundproofer when they're starting out trying to soundproof everything?
That's always great to ask for experience. Also, if you're looking to buy a material, don't just believe the one page or two-page sales brochure.
Mm.
Ask questions of whoever you're buying this product from. And if they don't seem to know the answer, then get an expert involved because I find you mentioned apartments and floors. There's a huge misconception in my industry about what we call acoustical underlayments. These are soft materials like rubber and cork that go beneath hard floor coverings in apartments to reduce the amount of footstep noise that you hear. If you've ever lived in an apartment, you've probably heard the person above you walking around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens almost everywhere. And one thing is it's nearly impossible to completely soundproof a multifamily building. So you're never going to get it completely soundproof, but there are products that allow you to reduce that noise quite a bit. One of the problems is the standard test method for these materials is to test on a 6-inch concrete slab in a laboratory.
Mm.
That's a relatively small room. Well, a lot of apartment buildings aren't built with 6-inch concrete slabs, and the materials perform very differently if you have wood frame or a little bit of concrete on top of a metal deck or any other kind of construction. The number that is reported in the sales brochure may not apply to your building at all. And it's not that they're lying about their performance. That's just the way it was tested. But if you're not an expert in it, you may not know to look for that. And I had a condo client who was actually the president of his condo association, and he installed a product that claimed we have a measure called IIC rating, and that's the measure of how well a floor reduces things like footstep noise. The product literature claimed he would get an IIC rating of 72, which in our industry is very high. When he put it in and he put this beautiful marble floor down on top of it, he was baffled by the fact that his neighbor down below was complaining that he could still hear the footsteps. So at that point, the president of the association called me in to run a test because they had standards they had to meet. Remember, I said the sales brochure claim was 72. I tested in the field and I got a 38.
Wow.
Now, that's
That's
not
like,
half as, yeah, and that's not even half in acoustics because everything in acoustics is on a logarithmic scale. And if you remember back to your elementary or middle school education and you talked about logarithms in math,
mm,
most people don't use those ever again in their life. I use them every day. And on a
that's
logarithmic
pretty short
scale,
words. Yeah.
yeah, every 10 points on that IIC rating
Yeah.
sounds about twice as loud.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, so that was a difference of more than 30 points. You can imagine that most of the noise was getting through that floor assembly.
Okay, Lisa, I have so the last number one big mistake people do when they are soundproofing their home or pretty much anything. What is it, and what is your tip for it?
Um, this topic is a little different than what we've been talking about. We've been talking about interior noise, but a lot of people have exterior noise issues like traffic or
Uh-huh.
maybe a rail line nearby or aircraft. And a lot of people think that if you plant a row of shrubs or trees, you can block that traffic noise from your house.
Yes, yes.
That's a very common misconception. I call those a psychological noise barrier because some people think, oh, if I can't see it, I can't hear it, right? But it doesn't quite work that way. There's been a lot of studies done that show you need a very dense, deep forest. I'm talking, you know, 50 meters of forest of evergreens that would be have their foliage year round in order to make a measurable difference in that sound level from the road. So what you again need is mass like a barrier.
I agree with you because I know that the easiest test is just you stand on to an opposite. You can just talk to somebody on another side of the shrubbery, and you're going to notice it's very easy. You hear everything.
Great point. Yeah. So I tell people, certainly having landscaping between you and the road is better than having a reflective surface like a concrete paver slab or even water. Water is reflective. So that's certainly better. The ground cover will absorb a little bit of sound, but it generally does not fix the problem.
I see. Is there anything else that you want to add regarding this subject, or the biggest mistakes people do when they are soundproofing?
Oh gosh.
There's so much, right?
An interesting thing I've had a number of inquiries about is a lot of people are familiar with noise canceling headsets that you can
Yes.
wear on an airplane. And a lot of people think there should be something like that for the home.
Mhm.
Can't you just install something that will cancel out all the noise I'm hearing? Unfortunately, we don't have that technology yet. Maybe someday.
Oh, so all of that, but so white noise on the other hand, I've heard about that. That just doesn't, it just drowns out the noise. It doesn't really remove it, correct?
That's correct. Now that can be helpful in some cases, especially I mentioned the traffic before.
Mm.
White noise is something you can use. It's something that the mind will eventually pretty much tune out. And if you can set it at a level where it's blocking out things like traffic horns or tires going by, a noise that's not continuous, it can be very helpful. But it's not canceling the noise. It's not taking the noise away. It's actually adding noise to your environment.
I see. So, Lisa, if people want to find out more about you or they need a consultant regarding soundproofing and so on, how can they find you?
Well, the easiest way would be to visit my website, quietlymakingnoise.com.
Mhm.
And I also have another website for the product that I invented and patented, acousticalshutters.com. All of my contact information is there, along with more information about projects I've worked on and my resume. If people are looking for an acoustical consultant in general, our professional society, the National Council of Acoustical Consultants, is a great resource. The website there is ncac.com. And there's a directory of consultants all over the world. Most of our members are in the United States, since that's where the organization started, but we do have international members as well.
Awesome. And that's actually where I found you. Lisa, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It was an interesting discussion.
And that's it. Thank you for watching. If there's a particular subject you want me to interview a soundproofing expert about, then leave a comment down below and I'll get right back to you, hopefully with a new video. And what was your biggest mistake you did when you started to soundproof? I think we all want to know that in the comment section. And if you liked this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will publish more content on this channel soon. Until next time, take care.